We are live. Yes. Welcome to the Good Fight. I am super excited that you are here to join us for this conversation. I don't know what's about to happen. I've been sitting here for quite some time just meditating and thinking and wondering, and I have no idea. So I'm glad that you are here so that you can help me figure it out because I cannot figure it out on my own. Welcome to the Good Fight. I am your host, your guide, the Reverend Doctor. That's what they call me, but you can call me Denise. I am so just, I'm full tonight. Just full with a lot of emotion, full with a lot of thoughts, full with a lot of questions, full with a lot of uncertainty, just in a different kind, I guess a different energy going on tonight. And like I said, I hope that you'll help me figure it out. But I just want to welcome you to the Good Fight. If this is your first time joining us, thank you so much for being in this space. I am always just so tickled when I meet somebody out in the community and they say, "You don't know I listen to you, but I do. You don't know I watch you, but I Have y'all heard anything I've said? I think I need to start over because they got a message that was like, we lost connection to your mic. So welcome to the Good Fight. I am super excited that you are here. Tonight is filled with so much uncertainty on my part. Like, I don't know what's about to happen. I don't know what you are thinking. I don't know what I am thinking. Like, I don't know what's about to happen. So I'm excited to go on this journey with you and allow you to help me. Like, I don't mind saying I need help. Like, I can't figure this out. Like, help me. Y'all say something. Give me something to work with. If this is your first time joining us for the Good Fight, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I am thrilled always when I'm out in the community and somebody says, "You don't know I listen to you, but I do. I know you don't know I'm watching you, but I am." And like, I really appreciate that. It makes me feel some kind of way, like all giddy inside. So thank you for that. And those of you who watch on a regular basis, of course, I appreciate your support. I'm so grateful for your continued support because we've been doing the Good Fight now for quite some time. I think it's like 3 years. Has it been 3 years already? And so I am glad that even if you're not showing up live, I appreciate when you reach out to me, like you show up, you watch during the regular rhythm of your life. And then sometimes I'm talking to some of you and the statements that you make let me know that you were watching the Good Fight. And I'm like, okay. Like, I don't say anything. I'm just like, okay. So I just appreciate all of that. I'm just super grateful for all of you, however you show. Even those of you who are like, I don't appreciate what she be saying. I appreciate you saying that because it means that you were engaged, right? Like, you had enough, you got enough out of it to contend with it, right? To challenge it, right? To reject it. So I appreciate that. If you are joining us for the first time, there are ways that you can engage with the Good Fight. One of those ways is to locate yourself in the story. And I don't think that I take enough time helping people understand what I mean by that. And so when I say locate yourself in the story, when you hear something or when you read something that's in this space, then as you begin to think about it, then apply it to your life. Like, is this something that you have experienced? Is this something that speaks to your own lived experience? Is this something that you have felt? Is this something that you have thought? Is this something that lives in your body? Is this something that you have had to push out of your body? Like, where are you in this story? Even if it's something that you've never heard of before, you can say, well, I can't locate myself in the story because it's not mine. This is when you are looking through a window, which is the other way that you can engage. But locating yourself is about applying what is said and heard to your own yourself, to your own body, to your own mind, to your own soul. So that's what we mean by instead of saying, look at them, what they do. Like, I think I've said this before, when you go to a church service and you hear a sermon and you say something like, so-and-so need to hear this. It's like, no, let's not talk about what so-and-so needs to hear. What part of this do you need to hear? And so that's what locating yourself is all about. The second way that you can engage is, like I said, you're looking through a mirror where this is not your story. You've never experienced this. You've never even heard of this before. Like, I got to look up a song now that my friend sent to me. Like, think about this song. I'm like, I ain't never heard that song before. And so that's not, it's not part of my purview. So it means that I have to just sit back and say, okay, I'll take that in. Like, I'll receive that. And then I get to decide later what I want to do with it, if anything. I don't have to look the song up. I can if I want to. The choice is mine. But the story has been given. The story has been shared. And you have been gifted with it, and you have no responsibility. There's no accountability. It's just you get to decide if and when or not that you will engage it. A third way that you can engage in a good fight is to walk through a door. So after the session ends, after I click end stream, then what happens? Does the session, the content continue to live within you? Are you still thinking about it as you go to bed? Are you still thinking about it when you wake up in the morning? Do you think about it next week? Are you going to think about it next week when somebody says something, you're like, oh, I remember hearing that on the good fight? So walking through the door means you are still living with it beyond this moment in any number of manifestations, whether you're reading an article, reading a book, going to a book club, inviting somebody into conversation, picking up the Bible and reading it for yourself, like all different ways that you can continue to have this conversation mulling around in your body. That's what walking through the door is all about. And then finally, you can comment right here. We can put it on the screen. Everybody can see it and we can engage. You all can engage with each other, because I can't message you. I don't know why StreamYard want. Like, they keep coming up with all this new stuff. Like, this is new on StreamYard. Like, why don't y'all come up with a way for me to write y'all to have conversation? Like, I don't know. I'll look for a suggestion box and I can make that suggestion. But right now, you all can engage with each other, and I can just talk to you and you can talk to me through the comments. Y'all, I'm on some medication. I just got this medication, and one of the side effects is dry mouth. And I was saying to the doctor, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm a professional talker. I talk for a living. It is my life. And I can't afford I can't stop. I'm trying to drink water. So I was trying to have a piece of candy in my mouth, like under my tongue. Like, maybe that would give me that would lubricate my mouth while I'm talking. And that didn't work. Like, if y'all have any suggestions, please let me know, because I cannot stop taking the medication just yet. So I need to figure out a way around this dry mouth. So I'm drinking a lot more water at times in the middle of conversations in ways that I would not normally do. But tonight I wanted to talk about the flyer that I sent out. The title is Tell My Story. This really isn't a continuation of last week's talk when I was saying, like, let's have the cross and the crucifix, so that we are sharing more, like we're having a broader understanding of the story that surrounds Jesus, that grounds and sources our faith. It's now that I think about it, it's still in that same kind of theme of we are choosing to tell the story a certain way, and we are indoctrinating people according to that particular way that we are telling the story, without giving room for there to be other ways for people to interpret, other ways for people to receive, other ways for people to challenge the stories that are being heard or being told or being commanded. Right? Like, some of us are in spaces where it's like, this is what you're supposed to do. You better do it, or else you're going to hell. Like, some of us are in those spaces. And so this story really is about Mary and Joseph, because now that it's the Christmas season, a lot of people are talking about Jesus being born in the manger, and the three wise men were having that conversation. And for me, it is so bothersome. I'm listening to people preach. I'm listening to people talk. I'm listening to people share. I'm listening to people pontificate. I'm listening to all of these people having this conversation about Jesus. And I feel like there's so much that's being left out that I feel like I want to come in and say, can we tell other people's story? It's more to the story than just Joseph and Mary and Jesus. There's more to the story than just Jesus. There's more to the story than just the angels. There's more to the story than just the wise men. Like, there's so much happening. It reminds me of the civil rights movement of the 60s, when we talk so much about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and usually we'll couple that with Rosa Parks. So we'll talk about Dr. King, we'll talk about Rosa Parks. Some of us who are more, some of us who believe in defending ourselves, we'll talk about Malcolm X. We'll talk about, well, I don't even, some of us will, but most of us, we just talk about Dr. King and we just talk about Rosa Parks. And it's as if those are the only two people that was part of this entire movement that spanned years and included almost every member of the Black community. Almost, not everybody. So it's like so many stories that we are not telling about the women who were strategic in designing marches and protests. So many people who came together as a community to make sure that lunches were sack lunches were made for those people who were walking to work during the Montgomery bus boycott. So many people who decided they were going to use the funeral homes and the hearses to transport people who were unable to walk. But there's so many other stories surrounding this event, surrounding this movement, that it's really disrespectful to the movement to just talk about Dr. King and Rosa Parks. Yes, talk about them. I'm not saying don't, but there's so much more. There's so much more. Because if you want to talk about Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat, there's a whole nother woman, Claudette Colvin, who was young. She was like 16, and she refused to give up her seat before Rosa Parks did. And then Byron Rustin refused to give up his seat. Like, there's so many other stories that we just casually dismiss. Or do we? Do we not talk about them because we don't know them? And I think that is where I am finding myself right now after having all of these conversations and listening to all of these sermons and all of these stories. I'm like, do you even know what else is out there? Have you even been introduced to something else, to something more, to something beyond? And if you have, what is your response? When somebody says, wait a minute, let's think about this, do you get upset like, that ain't my Jesus? Or do you feel like you got to defend the Bible? Do you feel like you got to defend yourself? Like, what is happening when we are having conversations? Or are we even having conversations? Again, like, are we just navigating life in a circle, in a bubble that includes only those people who we assume believe the same thing that we believe? And so because we assume that they believe the same thing that we believe, there's no reason to have the conversation because we already think we know what they're going to say or how they're going to feel. And so I'm just in this space of, can we talk about something else besides what we keep talking about? I don't want to keep talking about Jesus in the manger. Why? Because by the time the wise men got there, Jesus was 2 years old. This a toddler. He about talking. What are you talking about with this manger? When we talk about the three wise men, it was like nobody during this time would travel with just three people. It would be an entire caravan. Like, I don't want to talk about three wise men. Like, that's all, we already know that story. We've already heard it. We've already committed it to memory. We're already telling it to our children. The 2-year-old toddlers, right? The toddlers that are the same age as Jesus probably know the story and can tell it to you with their own ability. So can we talk about something else? And I don't want to keep talking about Joseph and how it was Joseph's decision what he was going to do with Mary because he found out that she was pregnant and it wasn't his child. I mean, just even thinking about that story, first of all, it's like they were betrothed to each other, which means there was a promise, there was a commitment. But then you're like, but we call them husband and wife, but they're not husband and wife because they haven't gotten married. And then when they get married, they're not going to have sex. So you're not married unless you consummate. So I did not know this until I became a pastor, but many people believe that when you attend a wedding and you hear the officiant, like me, the person who is saying, who's standing up there in between the two people, regardless of their gender or their sexual, their gender identity. So you're standing up there between the two people, and a lot of people think that when I say I now pronounce you wife and wife, husband and husband, husband and wife, whatever we talk about, whoever this is, then you walk, you may kiss your partner, your spouse. A lot of people think, okay, they are married. And so we all excited. Some people throwing rice. We don't do that anymore because it's not environmentally sound, but we used to do that, or at least they do it let me say this, they do it in the movies. I've never done that. I've never even seen it done anywhere. I've seen people give us a cachet of rice, on your table. I've seen that, but I've never seen anybody actually throwing any rice. And then people walk out and you think that you're married. But for me, as the officiant, I always say, I used to say I would not marry a couple if we did not have, pastoral counseling. I wanted to do counseling before I would actually marry you. And during that counseling session, those counseling sessions, I would decide whether or not I would be willing to participate in this. Because I'm like, if I can see that y'all are going to end in divorce, then let's work through that before you get married. Instead of getting married and then circling back and being like, Pastor, you told us. Don't get me wrong. If you circle back and say that, I'm going to work through it with you. I don't have a problem with that. But if I can see it and if I can point it out to you, then I don't want to perform the ceremony because I don't want to be a part of it. That's how I used to think. But it became increasingly clear to me that even when I would point things out, even when I would say, it is clear to me, I'm not reading no crystal ball, I'm not Hezekiah reading the right, it is absolutely clear to me that this is not going to work, not now. Doesn't mean it won't ever work, but it's not going to work now. Let us continue to have some sessions. Let's work through this. But what I realized is that many people, by the time a couple seeks out a pastor or a person to marry them, they've already decided no matter what, they're getting married. Many of them are already living together. Many of them have already commingled their finances. Many of them even have children together. There's so much already in motion that for me to suggest that they not get married is what? Girl, bye. And so I'm like, okay, well, since the train has already left the station, then my theory is shot. So you want somebody to marry you? Absolutely, I will. And I will be on this journey with you so that when what I say to you manifests, you will know that you can come to me. You don't have to experience any shame. You don't have to be embarrassed. I am here. Let's figure it out. And so it's already been decided. So it's no need of me trying to say, okay, what I am or what I am not going to do. I'm going to, take this holy stance and be, the Lord's voice to you. Just didn't work like that. So we have to allow people to be who they are, where they are, to make their own decisions. So we're talking about Joseph all the time, about him making this decision about marriage, they're betrothed to each other, but we call them husband and wife, but they haven't gotten married. And so I would say to these couples, so now I'm not in a counseling session, I would just say, pull them to the side before, because some people, I'm just showing up, I'm meeting them for the first time that day. So, that happens. And I pull them to the side and I say, listen, even if it's a quickie in the limousine, even if it's a quickie in the back of y'all car, even if you are exhausted by the time that you get home, I need you to engage in sexual relationship with each other, because it is the consummation of the marriage. It's the consummation that makes it a marriage, right? You have to have sex. It's not the ring. It's not the ring. It is consummate. It's the consummation. So have sex tonight. Because if you give all these vows, like, have sex tonight. Like, don't wait till in the morning. And if you do wait until the morning, then that's the day you celebrate your wedding anniversary. It's all good. But if you want this to be your wedding day, then I need you to consummate the wedding, consummate your vows on this night. And many people are like, what? I ain't never heard of that. Yes. And that is my point. There's so much about the story of Jesus and the characters in the Bible that we leave out. And so tonight I was saying on the flyer, can we tell my story? And I was really thinking about Mary, because again, we talk about Joseph and how he was committed to this woman, and then he finds out that she's married and he has a decision to make, and he's like, I'm not going to be a part of this. I'm going to divorce her. And I'm like, how you divorce somebody that you're not married to? But legally, the betrothal was legally binding. I don't know how it's legally binding, but it's legally binding. So even though you're not married, even though there's no consummation, in today's world, it wouldn't be a marriage. But in this world, like, it was legally binding. And so in order for him to get rid of her, then he would have to sign some papers to divorce her. And he's trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to divorce her, but I don't want her to be a public spectacle, because if the public finds out, then she is susceptible to being stoned, because these are the laws around this time. And so he's like, I don't want that. I love this one. Like, I want to be with her. I don't know if it's love or not, because usually the betrothal was based on, it was a contract. Actually, I think all marriages are contracts. Like, I know that we say we love each other. I know that we say that you complete me. I know we do all of that. But actually, the reason that we get married is so that we can make sure that we are taken care of in case the marriage dissolves. And so the marriage license is really more of an agreement. It's more of a contract to say, look, just in case this don't work out, you not leaving me without what's mine. Oh my goodness. And so to me, the whole construct of marriage is like this anticipation of divorce. Like, I'm trying to make sure I'm prepared. I'm trying to make sure I'm covering all my bases. I'm checking all my boxes. Let me just, so it's not this commitment. And that's one of the things that I learned when I was advocating for people who were lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and the alphabet, the acronym, it's not an acronym. Yeah, the alphabet that continues, like intersex, asexual, agender, like for all of that community. And one of the things that I learned once I started interacting with folks is that when we think about the divorce rate between people who are heterosexual, it's much, much higher than it is for people who are same gender loving. And one of the reasons why is because it's just like a recent phenomenon, a recent court ruling that people who are same gender loving can get married. This community would bind themselves to each other without any such legal papers. Like, I don't have any guarantee. I don't have any contract that secures me. I don't have anything that says that you're going to owe me if this doesn't work out, that I'm going to sue you if you don't give me what I believe is mine, or if you try to take what I think is mine. It's like, no, we come together because as two people deciding that we want to journey through life together, we're going to give ourselves over to each other for as long as this journey lasts. I'm committed to you, not to a piece of paper, not to the state, not to any I was going to say agency, but we're not committed to anything beyond ourselves. This is about us. And so that kind of commitment that is fortified and rooted in the love and the care and the concern and the desire to be your best self and to help the other person be the best version of themselves, then that is more binding than I just want to let you know I got a way out. And so this covenant between Joseph and Mary is like what we have now in the in the heterosexual realm. Well, now it's with anybody because the court ruling that I'm already one. You could look at it this way. You don't have to, but you could. I've already got one foot out the door because anything that comes up, I'm out and I'm taking my half. And so he had to give her a bill of divorce. He had to sign some papers to divorce her because she was now pregnant and it was not his child. It could not have been his child because they had not consummated their relationship. So they were not married. And so he's trying to figure this out. He is meditating, he is thinking, he's mulling this over. He's just sitting in silence like, I don't know what to do because I don't want her to die, but I also don't want to be a part of this, whatever she got going on that has, that's got her pregnant. And as he is in his Selah moment, as he's pausing to calmly think about this, then he has a dream, and an angel visits him in the dream and says, don't worry, the baby that Mary is carrying is from the Holy Spirit. So go ahead and take her as your wife. When the baby is born, name that baby Jesus. I'm going to give you the name. Jesus is a variation of Joshua, which means the one who saves. So this is going to be the baby's name. And so that's what Joseph does. And many of us know that story. And why do we know that story? We know that story because we tell it over and over and over and over again, as if that is all there is to know about the birth of Jesus, that Joseph was betrothed to a woman who got pregnant without him. Oh, poor Joseph, what is he going to do? But do we stop and ask ourselves or say to ourselves, poor Mary? During this time that this story would have been written about the people who are part of these communities that we say now back in the day, once you have your menstrual cycle as a young girl, then you are now able to be given over to marriage. So if I think about my own life, I started my cycle when I was in 6th grade. Usually 6th grade is about 11 or 12 years old. Yeah, 7th grade, maybe 12. So maybe I was 7th grade because I was 12. So if I start as early as 12 and you say, okay, now because you have a cycle, you are ready for marriage. Like, let's think about that for a moment. What does a 12-year-old know about marriage? What does a 12-year-old know about life? What does a 12-year-old even know about her body? Because if the stories that I've heard ring true for you, many of us, we grew up in homes where we didn't talk about sex. We didn't talk about the cycle. Our parents were just waiting, like my mom. My mom's story is that when she had her cycle, the way her relationship was with her dad, anytime anything happened that scared her or that worried her or that excited her, she would run to her dad. And so she would, so when her cycle came, she ran to her daddy. And her daddy said, go talk to your mom. Go talk to your mom. And what's interesting about the story is that her mother was waiting. She was ready. She already had the materials that she needed to use to help tell her what was going on and how she needed to use them with her, put them in her panties, and they had a little belt and all of this stuff. Like, her mama knew it's about that time. Like, so many mothers know that, but they don't always share the story about it. So many of us as young girls, when we start bleeding, we're like, oh my God, we don't know what's going on. And so I can only imagine being a girl during this time where you were not even considered like important. I'm surprised Mary even has a name. Because many times when we talk about the women in the Bible, they don't even have names because you were not important. You are a girl. Like, what? There's some stories about when people would have a baby. If it was a girl first, they would take the newborn baby, put the newborn baby outside and leave it so that the baby would succumb to the elements, because they don't want the firstborn to be a girl. They need the firstborn to be a boy, because there are all these laws about what's handed down to the firstborn, and they need that to be a boy because it's a patriarchal society. So for these girls, nobody's thinking about like sharing with you what's about to happen to your body. Let me sit you down and talk to you. Let's work this. I want you to have an understanding. No, I'm 12, and because I have a cycle, in fact, I almost forgot about this. In fact, your menstrual cycle made you unclean. So you could not even dwell among the other members of the community. You had to go to the tent. Anita Diamant wrote this book. I don't have that. Do I have that? Do I still have that book? It's called The Red Tent. And she talks about the community of women who end up in this tent because they are all menstruating at the same time, and how they form this community to take care of the kings and the men and the children. Like, it's a really good book if you are interested in that kind of thing, like knowing more about the community, like the real lived experiences of the women, especially during this time, that you're not going to get from reading the Bible. But you were having your cycle, like you were unclean. You had to go away. You could not. You definitely couldn't go to the temple, but you couldn't touch anybody. Like, you got your cycle. And so have we stopped to ask ourselves, what is Mary's story? Now, I know that we have the Magnificat, right? At some point, and when Mary meets, when Elizabeth comes to visit Mary 6 months into her pregnancy, then we have this story of Mary just giving this wonderful monologue of praise to God for being chosen as this woman who would deliver this child. Like, yeah, that's the story that we get from Mary. Because remember that the writers are putting these words in her mouth. But if you want to put those words in her mouth, can you put, what are the words that she would have spoken if you asked her how she felt being 12 years old and being given over to a man in marriage, and then saying she got pregnant by a spirit? So I'm lying in bed, and all of a sudden, something overtakes me and impregnates me. How did it happen? Like, did the spirit form a penis and penetrate her? Did she feel like she was having some kind of orgasm because it was a wet dream or something? Like, exactly what is happening to this young girl? And even if you say, well, she wasn't 12, she might have been 13. She might have been 4. She definitely wasn't older than 16. She probably was between 12 and 14 tops. Probably. That's probably the most accurate number. Those are probably the most accurate numbers. So even if you're 14, you're ninth grade, and you over here getting married, being pledged to be married to somebody, and now something happens and all of a sudden you pregnant and you've never had sex before. I would posit that unless you are a target of sexual violence, meaning sexual rape, sexual assault, most of us at 12 years old, we don't know nothing about having no sex. Like, unless you live in unless you have some abusive behavior happening around you, where people are targeting you and using and abusing your body, then at 12, you probably know. But if that's not your story, if your story is supposed to rock on like it's meant to at 12 years old, you're trying to run around here and play with some dolls. Maybe you want to kick a ball. Maybe you want to wear a dress. Maybe you want to put on overalls. You just laughing and giggling. That 12. And now you say all of a sudden some spirit comes over me and now I'm pregnant. And Mary's like, how I get pregnant and I ain't never even been with no man? Like, when was I with this man? And so you say, oh no, Mary, you wasn't with a man, you was with a spirit. Like listen to the words that are coming out of our mouths to a 12-year-old. But we don't talk about that. At first, I wanted to talk about Joseph and how old he is because somebody was saying that he's a teenager. I'm like, Joseph wasn't no teenager. So this is where I started to have problems. Because as I was thinking through this and listening to all the stories, thinking about all the stories that I've heard about Jesus and Joseph and Mary, people saying that Joseph was a teenager, and then you say Mary, if you're in the Catholic Church, you believe that Mary was a perpetual virgin. So a perpetual virgin would mean that she was a virgin before the birth of Christ, during the birth of Christ, and after the birth of Christ. Like she was always a virgin. So she never had sex. And yet, when Jesus is being crucified, they talk about his brothers. So if that's what you believe, and Jesus has brothers, if Mary was always a virgin, where did Jesus' brothers come from? So that would mean that Joseph would have had to be in a relationship that bore children before he married Mary. And as far as we know, Joseph has 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls. So how much time does it take you to have 6 children? So if Mary is 12, and usually culturally, the young man who the woman is betrothed to would be older, even if you say he's 19, how long does it take him to have 6 children before this 12 to 14-year-old is given to him if Mary is always a virgin? How does that work? And so then I said, okay, well, what if that's not what you believe? Okay, so maybe you don't have the Catholic belief. You have the Protestant belief. So the Protestant belief is what? Mary and Joseph got together and hooked up after Jesus was born. And so now this is where those brothers came from. So these are his half brothers. Is that how it works? Is that what you believe? I don't know. So that's where I started to get like bogged down. And I said, oh my goodness. Honestly, I don't even understand why it has taken me this long to figure this out. In the work that I do as a cultural strategist, we gather people together to have conversations that for some people are extremely uncomfortable. And so because we know that there's absolutely the possibility that it's a high probability that people are going to be uncomfortable in this space, we ground the space in touchstones. Like this is how we are going to relate to each other. This is how we're going to talk to each other, and how we're going to navigate this time. And as we were doing this work, we realized, oh my goodness, the touchstones aren't enough. We've got to start the conversation with vocabulary, because just because I'm saying the word diversity, just because I'm saying the word inclusion, just because I'm saying the word justice, just because I'm saying the word equity, and everybody's like, yeah, I've heard those words, doesn't mean that we understand the definition of them all in the same way. And so it is important for us to just do a baseline. We're not saying this is the only definition. We're not saying that this is the only way that you can understand it. But for the purposes of this conversation, we need everybody to be on the same page so that the conversation does not dissolve in the moment that we need to be fortified the most. And I do that on a regular basis in my professional life. And it just dawned on me today that I need to start having conversations with people who are Christians by saying, can you define your Christianity for me? Because when you say to a person, and you don't know whether or not they're Catholic or not, when you're talking to them, they say, well, I believe that Mary was a perpetual virgin. Okay, that's a different kind of Christianity than what we get at the Baptist church. Right? That's a different kind. So it is important to know that when the conversation starts, because you have a better understanding as people are talking. Oh, I get it, because you believe this. Well, I don't believe that. I believe this. So when I respond to you, I'm coming to you from my approach to what it means to be a Christian. And that may be different from yours. And we can't say that every Baptist church has the same understanding of what it means to be Christian. We can't say that every Methodist, like maybe that's why we have we have all these denominations, because we're defining Christianity in a different way. You talk about the Church of God in Christ. In order to be a Christian, you gotta show the evidence of the Holy Spirit. Like you gotta you got to speak in tongues, right? You have to be able to show me, prove to me through these gifts that you are given by the Holy Spirit that you are Christian. And so that's a different kind of Christian from the kind of Christian I am. I grew up in a church where didn't nobody say that. We call it the amen stuck in your neck. Like we didn't do all of that, right? Now, when we were young, there was a time where there was this one lady, you could count her down, baby. You could count her down. You could just sit over there in the corner and be like, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I saw it. Here it goes. Right, there was a time, but then we went through this whole period where no, we're going to be more, sophisticated in our worship, and we're not going to do all of that. It don't take all of that. My mama would even say they don't take all of that. And my mama hates 7-Eleven songs. We call them 7-Eleven songs, where you go to a church and there's a praise team up front and they sing 7 words and they sing them over and over and over. So it's 7 words 11 times. And so we call them 7-Eleven songs. So my mama she didn't want to go to a church that was charismatic. That was a different kind of understanding of how the Holy Spirit moves in your body. And so all of these different ways of Christianity manifesting itself matters when you're having the conversation. So I really am going to practice this because I just realized it today. So I'm going to start practicing it tomorrow because I'm not going to see anybody else tonight. I'm at home. So tomorrow I'm going to start practicing. If I have a conversation, I'm going to say, hold on. Let's first help me understand what your Christianity looks like to you. Because I am fully persuaded that we've got to stop acting like there's a cookie cutter method to believing in Jesus Christ. Like me, I honestly, when I was having this conversation with myself earlier, before I came on, I asked myself, can you even classify yourself as a Christian? Because I don't believe everything that's in the Bible. So if that is the mark of a Christian, that you got to believe the whole Bible, that it is the inerrant word of God and there are no mistakes, well, then I can't be a Christian, because I don't believe that for 1 second anymore. Not for 1 second. And so then that means if that's the kind of Christian that I am, and you are the kind of Christian who believes that absolutely every single word in this Bible came directly from God, then we need to know that before we start talking, because if we don't, the conversation is going to get rough and it is going to dissolve very quickly. And so when I'm having this conversation with you tonight about, can we tell more of the story? Even that becomes difficult if all you do is focus only on the text. Let's read the text for tonight. This is Matthew chapter 1. It's written, Matthew chapter 1, written by Matthew the tax collector, who, this is probably the most Jewish of the Gospels, which is interesting because he was a tax collector, which meant he was like cheating the Jews. So it's interesting that someone who cheats the Jews now decides he's gonna write a book to tell you how to be a good Jew. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. That's for real. That's real talk. So Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. And here is the part this is the pericope about the birth of Jesus. And I'm just reading it from the New International Version because to me, it didn't matter. The story is going to be the same, different words, but it's still going to be the same. And so I just picked the New International Version because I think that's the default. If you're using the app that I'm using, the Holy Bible app on your phone, I think that's just the default. So it automatically pulls up the New International Version. You have to ask it to, you have to ask the app to prompt it to give you another version. And so this is Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. It is the birth of Jesus. And this is what I want to use to continue the conversation. So I'm going to put it up on the screen and I'm going to read it. And if you want to close your eyes, find a space to concentrate and just allow the words to wash over you, that's fine. If you want to read the text for yourself, which is what I would suggest for those of you who want to make sure that I am saying it right, because, hey, we make mistakes. I make mistakes. I might get it wrong. then you can follow along, like whatever you want to do. Like, you are free and liberated in this space. And so I'm going to read the text, and then I'm going to pause for the Selah. So 7 Mississippis for us to calmly think about what was just read, and then we'll keep going. Okay, here we go. This is how the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, came about. His mother, Mary, was pledged to be married to Joseph. But before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord has said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him and took Mary home as his wife. But he did not consummate their marriage until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. Again, the topic for tonight is about telling my story and telling the story of Mary. And actually, my, in this case, is Mary, but my could be anything. Like, I really want us to consider applying this topic to all of the stories. Like, when we read a text, when we read a pericope, we ask ourselves, okay, this pericope is focused on, it centers this particular person, but what about these other people? Like, what happened to them? Like, how did this affect them? Like, and you say, well, I don't know because it's not in the Bible. Okay, well, do some research. Like, there are other sources that you can use that'll help you understand the Bible. But it's verse 22 that really got me to thinking about this, about whose story we're telling and the why behind it. And even if we want to believe it, right? So I'm going to put it up here just one more time, just for us to focus on verse 22. Verse 22 says, all this took place to fulfill what the Lord has said through the prophet, that the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel. And so basically what it's saying is, when you look at the Old Testament, we see this story. Well, the Old Testament writers didn't have a clue that there was going to be a New Testament. In fact, the Old Testament writers had no clue that there would be 39 books in the Old Testament, because for the Jewish tradition, there were only 5 books, and it's the first 5 books. So what's that? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Like, that was it. That was the Torah. That was it. So these other 34 books, it's like, what? Where'd they come from? And then for you to now add an additional 27 books, it's like, what? Okay, so you got the Old Testament and you have this story, and now you decide, whoever decides, there needs to be a New Testament. You're reading the Torah. You say, okay, this story in the Torah says that there's going to be a virgin who conceives. All right, well, if you go through the whole Old Testament, there's no story of a virgin who conceives. Right? So we gotta make this come true. So some kind of way, we need a virgin that's gonna conceive. Does that mean it really was a virgin that conceived? Or does that mean somebody wrote it so that they could fulfill what was written over here in the Old Testament? I got to make this make sense. Have y'all ever done that? Have you all ever picked up part of a story in your own life And you want to tell somebody else your story, you realize, wait a minute. Case in point, the other day I was eating some nuts, some cashews. I was eating them, and I had eaten them in the morning, and now it was afternoon, and I was driving home. As I was driving home, I was running my tongue across my teeth, and I felt something lodged in my tooth. And so I'm trying to figure out where's my tooth, where's my tooth. And so I had to actually get, I would say, a toothpick, but anybody who knows me, I will pick up anything, because I can't stand for something. I don't care what it is. I don't care if I'm uncouth. I don't care if I'm not ladylike. I don't care. I got to get this out of my tooth. And so I was in the car. I pick up something to dislodge it. So I dislodge it, and it falls in my mouth. When it falls in my mouth, I pick it up and I look at it, and I'm like, oh, this must be one of those. This was a part of the nuts that I had eaten earlier. So I'm about to tell my friends this story about what happened with me with my teeth. But I realized that it's not going to make sense unless I first give them a backstory. So I've got to give them the backstory of, hey, I was doing this, this, and this, so that they will understand what's happening now. Okay. So that theory of, I've got to make sure that I can find a way to connect this so that it makes more sense. For me, yeah, that absolutely happened. But for writers, for filmmakers, for playwrights, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that actually happened for me to write it. Nor does it have to be something that actually happened for people to believe it. All I have to do is say, what's the best way to get this message across? I know I need to say this. It is the same thing that happens with Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Because when we think about, when we learn more about the people of the Old Testament, the story actually starts with the Exodus. That's what the story starts with. The story starts with Pharaoh saying, let my people go. And so people who looked at that, whoever it was, I don't know who it was, you don't know who it was, nobody knows who it was, but whoever looked at it said, now, okay, how we gonna start with the people coming out of Egypt if we don't tell them where the people came? Like, so where did these people come from? Come on, y'all. Let's get together and think about where could these people have come from? And so got all of this mythology, all of this stuff happening around them. And so we're like, oh, we're gonna pull from all of these things. We're gonna come up with the creation story. And I know that they just came up with it because if you read Genesis 1 and then you read Genesis 2, both of them are creation stories and both of them are different. So which one is it? Was it the 7 days or not? Like what? So these are stories that we are telling. Now, only certain kinds of Christians would be willing to accept that. Other kinds of Christians are going to reject what I just said outright. And both of them are okay. If you believe that they are stories, okay. If you believe it's the absolute truth, okay. All I'm suggesting is that when you begin to have stories about your faith, start with where you are in it. What kind of Christian are you? What do you believe? What is your conviction? What is your faith all about? Because we can no longer assume that just because somebody says they're Christian, that means that you all have the same beliefs. Because there's a whole lot of evangelical Christians. Actually, I don't know why we've given the word evangelical to white folks, white conservative Christians. I don't even know why we have, because evangelical means I'm spreading the good news. And the good news for some of us is Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. So if that's your good news and that's what you tell people, then you're evangelical. Doesn't mean that you are extreme. It just means that you're evangelical. But anyway, the way that we talk about evangelical Christians is that, they're talking about how they got to legislate in the name of God. So no abortion, no this, no same gender loving, no public programs, no government programs, social programs, like all of that because of their Christianity. Well, that ain't my Christianity. So I'm not saying that you can't have your Christianity, because who am I to tell you what you can do with your Christianity? All I'm saying is that ain't mine, boo. So if we're going to have a conversation about our faith, you can't assume that I believe the same thing you believe, because sooner or later, and it's probably going to come sooner before it becomes later, sooner rather than later, this conversation ain't going to end well. It's not going to bear fruit, because we're going to think we're talking about the same thing when actually we are not. And so the first question becomes the one that I'm wrestling with right now. Not just what kind of Christian are you, but in this day and time, are you even still Christian? Do you still believe the stuff that you were taught as a child? Do you still practice the faith like you did as a child? Or when you were in college? Or when you got married before you got divorced? Or when you were with child before you lost your baby? Like, what's the spectrum of your Christianity? Or are you forcing yourself to believe what you used to believe, even though your body's telling you that don't make no sense no more? Because you don't know how to divest from that, because you are afraid that will send you to hell? Like, who are you as a Christian? And how can you articulate that to other people? Because I do say this, I may not be a Christian, but I do read the Bible, and I do find life in the Bible. I love the stories, even though I love the stories. And there are some stories I'm like, now what the? But there are many of them that I love, and there are so many principles that I apply to my life. And one of them is, you ought to always be ready to give an answer for what you believe. So I don't have to defend my belief, but I do have to articulate it. I do need you to understand where I'm coming from. You ain't got to agree with me. You don't have to believe me, but I need to be able to make it plain to you what I think about this Jesus, about this God, about this Holy Spirit. I need to be able to, I used to have a friend who went to church all the time and would take notes all the time. I mean, he had journals and journals and journals of notes. But if you asked him what happened in the church, what happened at church, like what did they talk about, he would say, wait a minute, I got to go get my notes. So he could not articulate anything because he didn't have any notes, which meant it wasn't his. It was not something that he had internalized. It was not something that he had digested. It was not something that he was living out. It was just something that he heard and he wrote down. So how many of us can actually articulate what it is we believe and why? Again, not because you have to defend it, but because you ought to be able to give a reason why. You got to be able to stand firm on it. Stand on it. This is what I believe, and this is why I believe it. I had a friend the other day say, look, I don't know nothing about going to all this church. I don't know nothing about all this, worship and all that, but I do believe in God because this is what he did for my husband. This is what God, you can't convince me that anybody else other than God did it. That's why I believe in a God. That's articulation. And so many of us are trying to have conversations about a faith that we don't even understand why we believe it. So then how far is that conversation going to go? And then when those conversations dissolve, how strong is your relationship with the person, your dialogue partner? How strong is that relationship? Can it withstand the disillusion of this conversation? Because once you realize that y'all don't think the same way about Jesus, what will that do to you? If you find out that the person living in your house don't agree with you, what will that do to your relationship? Do you then become judge, juror, and executioner? Are you going to hell? What happens there? And what happens if you don't agree and you have children together? What happens there? I think these are important questions for us to ask, especially during this season that we call Christmas. Because again, another story, Jesus was not born on December 25th. It's just, if we pay attention to the text, Jesus was most likely born in the spring. So now that here we are in this season of giving, which is another thing I don't understand. If it's Jesus' birthday, why are we giving each other presents? Especially when I say you are Jesus, you are God, and then y'all say, that's blasphemous. Okay, well, then if you're not Jesus, why is you getting a present on Jesus' birthday? What are we doing? What are we doing besides fueling the system of capitalism? What are we doing? And so it is my hope that as you walk away from this space, that you will consider that whatever you are reading in the Bible, whatever verse, whatever chapter, whatever book, whatever testament, that there is somebody's story that is not being told. The same way we do African American history in this country right now, where we choose not to remember, we choose not to tell, we choose to deny access to. The same way we are formulating these curriculums that say people who were enslaved wanted it, they benefited from it. The same way we do that, it is no different with the Bible. There are certain stories that we deny people access to. We did not include them in the Bible. They didn't make the cut. Nevertheless, the story is real and it's true and it's somebody's. How can we tell that story? That's one thing to consider. But the other thing, how do you tell your own story about your own faith? Can you articulate what you believe and why? And if not, will you consider getting to work on that? I think it will help us in our relationship building. I really do. Thank y'all so much for joining us for the Good Fight. We will be live right back again next Tuesday, 7 p.m. right here in this space on Facebook Live with your girl Denise. Not your girl Denise. I get that from Lola, your girl Lola. With me, Denise. See you next week.